Welcome back to another episode of the Wrinkly Brain podcast. This is a podcast where we like to goof, gaff, talk about EDH a little bit. I'm your host, Ethan, and today I have my returning co-hosts, Jason and Cameron, and another member of SmoothBrain, Sam. Sam, go ahead and introduce yourself to us.
Hi, I'm Sam. I started playing Magic in 2019, right before the release of Throne of Eldraine, uh, which is still one of my favorite sets, just because of the just because of the art and storyline to it. Uh, I really like playing enchantment style decks. Shrines is one of my babies, as you've seen on the channel a few times. I also like Voltron, as you've seen by my Galea deck that's been on the channel. I started out playing Modern and eventually just made my way up to Commander just because of mostly because my play group decided they want to play Commander, so I started to jump in on it too. And I started with the Estrid Precon deck, which I still plays into that enchantment theme.
You knew what you wanted from the beginning, is what it sounds like.
I knew what I wanted.
Well, we're really happy to have you on this week. We're really excited. Before we start, though, I wanted to give a brief apology for the slight delay in last week's episode or last episode for the podcast. The editor, had a lot going on in my life. Ended up moving 3 hours away from where I was, and life stuff. So just want to apologize for the delay. Hopefully, smooth sailing from here. But let's just hop right into it. So the main thing we wanted to start talking about today is Sam came in very recently to Magic in general. Throne of Eldraine, while it feels like yesterday, was 2 or 3 years ago at this point, which is crazy to think about. But compared to all of us have been playing for a lot longer, especially Jason, he's a very new player to us. And I really want to delve into the differences between my experience starting out and then Sam starting out during like the fire period and how those perspectives shifted. So with fire design as a normal thing for you, Sam, is there a clear power difference between sets? Like between old sets and new sets?
I feel like there is. I feel like sets in the past, like in the middle part of Magic, uh, have a lower power level than what it is at the beginning and the end. I mentioned in a conversation at one point where it's like a parabola shape where it started off really, really high power level and it dipped down, and now we're starting to see that incline back into more powerful cards being printed.
Yeah, definitely. Like sometimes talking about it gets a little bit weird because there's always like you go to the old cards and you look at alpha and you see, power 9, for example, and you go, that's the power level of the set. And then you see things where it's just like, we also have 1 mana +3/+1 or -1 or something like that for Unholy Strength, whatever it was. Like, there's a lot of there's this weird disconnect that happens, but you also see that in current sets as well when you talk about commons versus rares, for example.
You can see
Uh,
some of that power difference even in the same cycles of cards, like the boon cycle, I think it's called. You have within that you have lightning bolt, which is a great staple. You have ancestral recall, which is power 9, and you also have healing salve. So
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Good old
it's
healing
they didn't
salve.
know what was powerful and what wasn't at the time.
yeah. Brief explanation of what that is. So the boon cycle
I'm sorry.
is a collection of 1 mana instants in alpha that give you 3 of a resource for 1 mana. So the most commonly seen one is actually Giant Growth, which gives +3/+3 for 1 mana.
Mhm.
Then Lightning Bolt, 3 damage. Healing Salve, which is uh, gain 3 life or prevent 3 damage. Dark Ritual, get 3 black mana. And then lastly, Ancestral Recall to target player draws 3 cards, which is broken.
Hmm.
Yes, we have Healing Salve and Ancestral Recall in the same cycle.
Yeah, it shows you how powerful drawing cards are now that like divination is or thirst for knowledge is a really good card. That's
Mhm.
4 mana instant speed, or is that 3?
3.
Sorry, 3 mana.
Three.
3 mana instant speed, draw 3, and discard 1, potentially 2.
Yeah, if you can't meet the condition.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But also, speaking of thirst for knowledge, particularly that was
Mhm.
just reprinted in Kamigawa.
Mhm.
You're saying it's a powerful card,
Yes.
just because that's our most recent set. How do we feel about the design of that set? Is that one pushed? Are we like on the upward trend of that parabola that Sam was talking about at this point? Like, do you think that that's like a really powerful set in general?
Yeah, so we're actually so fire design is functionally over. we are out of the fire design territory that was largely from War of the Spark and 2 years following that. Now we're outside of that 2-year period. But Kamigawa Neon Dynasty really does have a lot of power put into it, but it's not like the highest end cards are the most powerful effects. It's really like they just brought the entire bar up. The uncommons in this set are absurd. Like the fact that Reinforced Ronin, a 1-mana 2/2 haste creature, is at uncommon. Yeah, you have to return it to your hand, but it also has channel to cycle it. Like that's just a really, really good card that sees some modern play.
Reality Heist, especially as well. I think that card is bonkers as well.
And I think Experimental Synthesizer, that common, I think that's just a really solid card.
Wait, that's a common?
I think so. Yeah. Is it seeing Pauper play?
You get me, right?
It is seeing Pauper play.
Figured. Like Boros Monarch, yeah, in a Kadoltha Boros deck. And even like the Shiba Inu dog enchantment creature that cantrips. I forget its name. But like Spirited Companion, thank you. Just seeing that many, like it, especially it being an enchantment creature, being a white creature that cantrips for 2 mana. The last time we had that was Wall of Omens, and then we had Priest of Forgotten Lore in the Forgotten Realm set. That was 3 mana.
That was 3 mana.
That was 3 mana. But just seeing, as you said, the commons and uncommons power being pushed up is really interesting.
A lot of the uncommon sagas in this set, I tend to enjoy more than the rares. And then there's one of the mythics that's just crazy powerful, but mostly the uncommon ones are the star in my opinion.
All right, let me guess. Michiko's Reign of Truth.
Yeah. Yep. All the glitters on a stick. I love it.
Well, oh, that's what that one is. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, of course, Sam had to bring up enchantments. That was the thing he liked about Kamigawa was the enchantments. And then also the shrines too. We can't forget about those in this set. There was a lot of really cool stuff in that set, which was really interesting to push up the power level in general. In a way, not like Throne of Eldraine that was overpowered, right? Because that we can all agree that set was kind of too much in a lot of ways. He brought Oko, Once Upon a Time, etc. This set doesn't feel broken. Exactly, right?
I forgot about Once Upon a Time. Got nuked from everything.
I completely misevaluated that card. I thought that was going to be bulk garbage. Like,
what?
Look, as much as I ring on free spells, I didn't think it was going to matter as much as it did. I did think it was good. I just didn't think it was good enough to see Modern and Legacy play.
I mean, the thing is that effect, like the floor of that card isn't that bad either. Like,
no, it's not.
Look at 5, take a creature or land. Like I played Maverick and it saw substantial play in Maverick for a little bit. Now it's kind of been left in the dust, but like for a time.
All right, so for real, when I first saw it, my immediate first comparison was I thought back to Oath of Nissa, actually, as I viewed Oath of Nissa functionally as like a green or as a green ponder. I thought it was an extremely good card. It saw a lot of play in standard. It was a staple. But once you moved into modern, like it saw some fringe play. People tried it out. It wasn't good enough. That is what I immediately thought of when I saw Once Upon a Time, because like, oh, it's just the green impulse.
Impulse isn't a bad
but
card,
it has
though.
a free option. I didn't think the free option was going to be as impactful as it was here.
Yeah.
All right, Sam. So we brought up Michiko's Reign of Truth, which is a really interesting card, and we know that when you got started, you started out with Modern Boggles as your deck, which seems like a card that you could potentially play there. Have you tried it out at all? Have you played much Modern recently?
Not really. Just because due to COVID and stuff, I haven't seen a lot of tournaments pop up. And when I do, they're usually a trio. But playing Modern Boggles, it does have a very special place in my heart. It's what I learned to play Magic on.
This is the format that you started out on, right? Is Modern?
Yeah, going to Modern tournaments is where I basically learned how to play Magic. I started off just attending them and watching what was happening, and then eventually I was like, you know what, maybe I do want to play this game. Started with playing with my brother Corey, who's been in a couple of videos, and Cody, who's also on the channel. It was just a really fun experience just to hang out with them. So it was really fun to get to connect with my brother a little bit more too.
Now, once you started with Modern, and you were introduced that way from your brother, how did you start branching out from there?
Well, the first thing I did was I went to Target and I saw a commander deck, one of the Escher Precon, and I was like, "Cool, I'll get this and try to build a modern deck out of it." And it did not work.
Mm.
Uh,
Turns out not everything's modern legal. Who'd have
not
thought?
not everything is modern
No.
legal, but yeah, that was I had that Precon for a while before I even started playing Commander. It had been like a year or so after I actually bought it that I actually started playing with Estrid around. And as soon as I did, my brother was like, "You're not playing with Estrid anymore," and switched out for Tivasa. And I was like, "You're playing this now."
He just
I mean,
upgraded the
fair
deck
though.
for you. or-
Arguably the better commander.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Can't deny. Tuvasa's real strong.
Yeah, she is.
I feel like she's a little underrepresented in the metagame, but she's really good.
I mean, Sithis exists now.
Yeah, Sithis is kind of taking the
Well,
throne. That's true.
But we're forgetting Sithis plus blue means it's a better commander, right?
Obviously, more colors
She's
makes the
like-
commander better.
Exactly.
But you can chain enchantments with Sithis.
Or you can play Sithis into Vasa, and you get the best both worlds.
Exactly.
And Sithis is an enchantment, so it draws you card off to Vasa.
Big brain.
Big brain.
Biggest of brains.
Big smooth brain. Big smooth
Mhm.
brain right there.
Very smooth brain.
Wait, that would be Wrinkly Brain.
Anyway, don't point out my flaws in logic, Cameron. We talked about this before the episode.
It's just so wrinkly. It looks smooth.
Mm.
Oh, it's that.
I don't know how I feel about that one.
Me neither.
So starting out, Sam, did you ever do like pre-release? Because I did a few personally. Did you ever like do pre-releases when starting out?
I did. Every time a pre-release came out, I think up until Zendikar, I went to do a pre-release. I started out with the Eldraine pre-release, and I didn't even get to build my own deck. I met one of my friends there, and he had been playing Magic for a while, and so he took the cards I had opened and was like, "Cool, here's your deck. Go have fun." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I didn't expect this." And I played it. Didn't get any very far just because still new to the game. And I played Theros one and pulled an Uro, and that was a fun one.
I think you did well that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a common thing whenever working at an LGS. One of the common ways that we tell people to get into the game is just try out a pre-release. Like, it's low pressure.
Mhm.
It interesting is also drafting is a way that a lot of people get into playing a format, which I don't actually recommend it that much because it's a good way to initially acquire cards and play in events. So if that's the goal, absolutely, it's a fantastic way of doing it. But the skills you need for drafting is a completely different subsection for what you need for just playing 60 card constructed in kitchen table Magic.
Mhm.
So I always am a little bit hesitant to recommend doing drafting.
I personally was never a fan of draft, which I didn't really know until one of my friends I got into Magic decided, "Hey, I want to build a cube," and we started playing. And after like 2 times of playing it, I was like, this just isn't for me.
That makes me sad to hear, but I understand. I love Cube so much.
That's fair.
I
It's
like
yeah, I
Cube.
can see the idea or the fun behind it. It's just not for me.
Have you ever done Vintage Cube before?
I haven't.
Have you ever
Fun.
watched any like content on it?
No, I haven't.
All right, there's a
Ooh.
spicy meatball we're gonna have to introduce you to at some point.
Okay.
Vintage Cube.
So
Would you like to play with Black
imagine
Lotus?
I play Black Lotus and
Ancestral
potentially
Recall.
Time
Mo-
Walk and just
Moxen.
every broken piece of cardboard they've ever printed. And
Not
a cube.
Shahrazad.
Most
Unfortunately.
broken cards they've ever printed.
We have
Unfortunately.
standards, all right?
So while we met you through Magic, obviously, we were on a Magic YouTube channel. We knew Corey, your brother, through playing Legacy. How do we meet you exactly? Because we were an EDH play group and like a Legacy play group. Do we meet you through Legacy, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, I believe we y'all had been doing tournaments for a while, and Corey was like, "Hey, I actually have an extra legacy deck if you want to come play," and it was Burn. So I was like, I actually know a little bit about Burn, so I might as well just go and see what's going on. And that was a lot of fun. Legacy is a very fun format, and playing Burn in there, even though I didn't win, I think, but 4 games total in all the tournaments I attended.
Actually,
Hey, if someone was on Rug Delver, you probably beat them up. That's when Burn was really good there for like a month.
I'm
4
sorry I
might be
challenged you so much.
4 might be a little bit of an understatement, but I didn't win a lot. It was still a lot of fun though, just to see decks and stuff that were different from Modern.
So I find you're getting how you started out pretty interesting compared to what a lot of other people do. Um, you just like had no kitchen table element to starting out until you eventually got into Commander, which was a year after when you started playing, which
Right.
is really interesting to me because like most of us have kitchen table starts. Like mine was a kitchen table start pulled between 2 play groups in 2 different cities from where I went to college in my hometown. So that quickly transitioned into standard and then into commander, which feels a little bit more like a natural progression, so to speak.
Mhm.
But starting out on modern is something you don't see very often.
Yeah, it was a kind of a big leap to get into Magic with. Uh, when I was really young, I would play Yu-Gi-Oh with Corey, and that's where I like did most of my kitchen table stuff. So getting into Magic, I guess he kind of like understood that I had been doing a kitchen table game and just bumped me up to the next level of a different game,
Mhm.
just so I can have a little bit more fun, I guess.
Yeah, I think Ethan and I both started with kitchen table as well.
Mhm.
I mean, I know we did because we learned at the same time, and
We
that's
lived
something
together or something.
that's something I'm really interested to hear from you about because I feel like one of the really fun aspects of Magic is learning through kitchen table, learning what cards are good, what cards aren't, because you have no concept of that when you're going and buying a deck builder's toolkit like me and Ethan, and then pulling some really bomb, like, I don't know what card, like the Archfiend of Despair. Is that the demon from Kaladesh? Like,
No. Maybe you're talking
whatever
about
it
the
is.
Demon Dark. Are you talking about our Demon Dark schemes or the
Demon of
Herald of
Dark.
Anguish?
Demon of Dark, Herald of
Okay,
Anguish,
Herald
maybe.
of Anguish is the improvised one. Demon Dark
The
schemes is
improvised
the
one.
minus X or minus whatever,
2
minus
HP.
whatever,
Well,
and -2 and
whatever
energy based on dying.
whatever the card is doesn't really matter. My point is just that, like, the card is good in a vacuum.
Demon.
Yes,
The
the card is good in a vacuum, but getting there in a format like modern, where games are decided on turn 3 and 4, those cards aren't going to cut it. And so being able to play those cards in kitchen table scenarios is really cool. And also, the whole like trading as a kitchen table player, like eventually working up the courage and going down to the LGS and like trading with people and like getting their input on just learning the game together is really cool. And my question to you is, do you think that you like missed out on anything like that, or are you still like happy with where you are, how you learned the game?
I'm pretty happy on where I am. Even though I missed the like kitchen table aspect, I still had a community around that I could play Magic with. Like I had y'all, I had Corey and Cody. Uh I had a few other friends that I eventually got into Magic just so I could have someone to play with. And I guess I kind of that was like a year after I had started playing Magic, so I did have a kitchen table experience with one of the people I got into Magic, just because I got them in. They were like, "Cool, just going to buy a box and let's see how it goes."
Nice.
That's fun.
It
Don't
was.
box sealed. Fun format.
Ethan and I have done it. Hour of Devastation.
We did that. And we did a Kaladesh box as well at one point, or Eighth Revolt. Was it Eighth Revolt or Kaladesh?
I can't remember. I
I think it
know
was Eighth Revolt. We split the box, and I got all the mythics, and you were upset.
I didn't remember this. You didn't have to bring it up again to make me feel this way. But
It
now I
was.
do.
I'm sorry. I will say one thing though. Sam's the exception to this. I don't think you started playing Magic until you spent hours just hitting random on Gatherer, seeing all the random shit you can find
We would do that in class.
in class. I remember seeing Time Vault and thinking, "What the hell is this?"
Why am I not playing this card?
And then I found out it's banned to Commander, and I was very sad.
Well, and it's also, several $1,000s.
I care much more about the band and commander part, thank God.
Yeah. So actually, speaking on Gather, this is actually a good segue into our next point. Online or just resources in general. That's a resource for some new players. But what are some like just to see cards, but for resources for starting to play the game? What are some good resources, Jason? What do you think is like a really good resource starting out to play the game?
Friends, they are magic.
Whoa!
The Gathering.
Stop, please.
No. But for real, like every one of us here, I believe. Actually, no. You two, did you start at? You two kind of like explored the game on your own and weren't immediately pulled in by friends, right?
Ethan and I,
Yeah.
we were pulled in by. I was pulled in by Logan because
and then
Logan
they
had
pulled
learned.
me in.
Yes.
So Logan got pulled in by the girl across the hall, and then Logan pulled Cameron in, and then I said, "You guys suck. You're abandoning me to play this card game. I got to play 2 now."
Excellent.
And that's how it started.
Yeah. So in this case, every single one of us started on Friends. Like Friends pulled us in. Literally, the only reason I started playing Magic is because, like, oh, this is a hobby that happens to be shared between 2 different friend groups. All right, I guess I'll try it out.
And look where you are now.
Yes, I have a podcast now.
Yay! Podcast. Love you, Jason.
But other than that, like, online resources were something I actually didn't start using until probably about a year and a half into playing.
Like interesting, because
yeah.
I started on like Tapped Out like
Tapped Out.
I started on Tapped Out like a month after. Well, like Gather, like looking at cards, but, like online resources for deck building. I was on Tapped Out within like a month, like middle of February. I started middle of January or middle of February. Like within the next month, I was on Tapped Out finding decks. It's very interesting to hear like you didn't use any online resources, but it was a different time period, right?
There were fewer resources. Like, of course, they existed, right? It's not like you can't go into Star City Games and read all their articles about recent competitive play. Rip current metagame.
Man.
Rip current Star City Games. But we just didn't. I just didn't use it for some reason. Like the first time I actually net decked anything and just built something or tried to build something that somebody else had built was Blue-Black Control with Fate Reforged, which is almost exactly a year from when I started.
Wow. So did you not keep like records? Like, so at this point, had you played any Commander yet?
I had played some, had my Prosh Precon and hated it.
Okay. We know why. So so your decks were all kitchen table. So did you log them in the online resources, or did you just like keep up with them? Like you just not knew. Maybe you did know exactly what was in every deck, like every card. But
oh yeah, I didn't know every deck, like every card in the format, for example, but I knew
what you played.
I knew most everything that was in the format. Like I had a rough idea as to what people were playing, and like I didn't need to look up what an Abzan deck looked like in Standard. People were playing it, so
yeah.
I just knew what the metagame was based on that.
It was more so just that like it would have been interesting to play Commander in a time where we don't have all these great resources to like log our decks and put them in and see, like, it tells us our mana curve. It tells us how many pips we have for every color. And so not being able to have that, I was seeing if you had perspective on that.
I'll be real. The resources were there. I just didn't know about them or didn't use them.
Yeah.
Like you absolutely could have used. Like we didn't have. I don't think we had Architect. Deck. The name of that website.
Architect.
Yeah, Architect. We didn't
Tapped
have.
Out.
I think we were. That was a newcomer at the time. Like it hadn't been. It was really all Tapped Out.
Yeah.
And then putting things onto MTG Salvation.
Salvation.
That's
Goldfish, what year did Goldfish come around? Like 2018? Like 17?
I would assume before that.
Or was it even before that?
Honestly,
I think videos in 2017 at least.
I think Goldfish came around in 2016. Actually, like I think it was there pretty early on for when I was playing.
They started a channel December 18th, 2014.
That's a channel, but that's not the website.
But the website, yeah, the website as like a deck building like tool.
Let me Google that one too.
Because now we have so many, like that Goldfish Tapped Out. Moxfield's fairly new, right?
Moxfield is very new.
The copyright on Goldfish started in 2012, so a little bit before the YouTube channel.
Maybe they weren't doing maybe they were. We don't know. They've probably been doing articles for a while. But maybe I don't know about the deck building. Like,
Their first article was a weekly update on October 5th, 2014.
Okay, yeah, so they were
and the
around.
formatting is
they've been
rough.
around.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
HTML
obviously.
standards have changed since then, so like,
Yeah.
it's going to be like a little bit different.
Yeah.
But so October 2014 is when they started.
Okay, so they've been around.
They've been around the block, yeah.
Wait,
But
they
yeah.
had articles from Tolarian College? Is this?
From the prof?
I'm not sure. It just says Tolarian College. As
Maybe
a,
he
like
wasn't.
at
Maybe
Tolarian
he
College.
wasn't community college yet. He was just college.
I don't know.
Maybe.
Okay,
We're
that's
digging up
a
some
rabbit hole for
history
later.
here.
That's later.
That's a rabbit hole for later. I want to go down.
We are digging up some history, man.
Speaking of
All
MTG
right.
Goldfish, their budget series is where I made my first deck that wasn't just given to me, because Core gave me Boggles to play, but the first deck I actually built and played was the budget Pons and Monocon. That was already made in 2017, and I was playing it in 2019. So
That's excellent.
I love you,
Doubling
Sam.
up.
Change 4 cards and you're good.
Wait, did that deck play Siege Rhino or no?
no, I didn't.
I want to Panharmonicon a Siege Rhino
You want to play 34 rhinos?
and Panharmonicons.
Yeah.
34
Okay,
rhinos.
moving on from that.
34
Moving on from
rhinos.
Cameron's disgusting fantasy right there.
What world? What is it a bad world where Siege Rhino exists? I think not. I think that's a pure world, a mid-range
Debatable.
Okay,
world.
that's a whole different can of worms. That's another episode entirely. Getting back on track just a little bit. One thing I do wonder is, so obviously Corey brought Sam to the game, but I feel like I would have brought Sam in a different way. I've got friends I'm trying to bring in that I introduced in a different way. What would we have done with Sam differently, right? If we were the ones bringing him into Magic, what would we have done differently? Cameron, like, what would you do?
As I said, kitchen table is a great place to start. Either be that like, buy them or split a booster box and make decks out of the packs that you have. Because as established players, I'm sure we have the resource, like the lands and whatnot, that we can support that kind of thing. But yeah, what about you, Jason?
I probably would have started on standard as opposed to modern just because of a more limited card pool. But at the same time, if you have people playing modern, the people you're working with is probably the best thing to start with.
Yeah.
I also would have tried a little more limited, like, yeah, granted, draft not the best, but more pre-releases, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. I feel like modern's a hard place to start, just personally, since it is a very fast format in a lot of ways. Like back then, that was 2019. The format was still pretty fast. There was a lot of combo decks. Getting a start in a format where you can't hardly play the game sometimes feels rough to me, as well as price, especially nowadays with like MH2 cards being ridiculously expensive. Price wise, I think starting in a cheaper format like standard, you can find some budget decks that were pretty decent, or just kitchen table stuff. But just price wise, expensive decks are a hard sell for new players.
Real
But
talk.
with Sam,
Hold on. Mentioning it going so fast, I'm checking this now. I'm pretty sure KCI was legal at that time. So.
Oh shit!
Ethan?
Seriously?
You were talking
Yeah.
about fast, Ethan. You were part of the problem. You played Phoenix.
I did. Okay, that was that 2019.
I think
That was
so.
2019.
Yeah,
that
it
got
was
banned. That got banned fall 2019.
Yep.
Oh,
Well,
Shark Fan
well,
Ironworks was
right.
banned January 2019.
That's right. Oh my God, Casey! I luckily only played against it like once at our LGS. Like
Oh yeah, this man walked face first into Hogak. This is great.
oh, you did walk face first in Hogak. No, Sam.
Sam walked face first into Hogak metagame.
That's right.
Yep. I remember the Hogak player too very well.
I feel sorry for you then.
Not gonna lie, I feel like Boggles is one of the handful of decks that probably could have competed.
Yes.
It died for the combo.
perfectly.
Well, everything did.
Oh, but it got to play Leyline in the sideboard. So it
You
wouldn't
did
die to the
play
combo.
Light of Sanctity.
Yeah, you can main deck Leyline. So you actually don't just die to the combo.
The Hogak deck's main deck Leyline of the Void.
Yes.
The Boggles deck main deck the Leyline of Sanctity.
Honestly, you probably main deck both. That metagame was terrible.
Horrible. So now that we kind of said like what we would do differently, Sam, do you wish you started differently? Or are you happy with how you started playing the game?
I'm pretty happy on where I started. Uh, because I did eventually like branch out and get into other forms of play. I do wonder if if I had started in standard, if I would enjoy it more. Because after playing modern, I just did not enjoy playing standard for the most part. Uh, I got into arena, just felt a little bit slow, so I just jumped back out. Uh, yeah, that's basically on like different formats that I could have got into of Magic. Uh, as for playing the game, I wish I had more guidance on like sideboarding or uh trying to the cost benefit analysis of whether to mulligan or not.
That's actually a really good like insight into it that I didn't even think about really. Like just playing the game, obviously the skills, but like even between games, like the skills of mulliganing properly, which is very important. Like at CEDH, like mulligans are like a very core thing for that format or subsection of EDH. And then like just sideboarding. Like I haven't sideboarded in so long, I forgot it existed. And I played
You called it
I played.
cardboard.
Yeah, I didn't even sideboard in Legacy because I had a Karn board. So who cares?
You brought in no extra walking ballista against me. I remember
I
that.
did. Yeah, I did. And you deserved it. Fucking made like wastelands and tutoring them out.
What most? I'd say not more decks than a lot of decks made deck Wasteland and Legacy.
I don't want to think about it. So my question, just for the group here, kind of going off of this, is it better for established players to give the new player immediate access to their format, like modern in Sam's case, or change what they're doing in order to give a new player an entry point within the new player's bounds? So for me, I picked up a pre-release kit of Kamigawa with a friend that was trying to get into the format and started trying to build decks with that and play with him on that level, whereas Sam was introduced to modern and played at a higher power level. Which do we feel is more accessible and better for new players starting out?
I would rather change what I'm doing to match the new player. Granted, I like battle boxes and loaning out decks, so like if you can make it so there's a functional zero cost entry point for a new player, absolutely do that. But if you don't have that option, you have to consider what the new player is going to be able to reasonably do, which is part of the reason why getting into Commander has been a popular starting point, since you can just buy precons and do a handful of upgrades. But getting somebody into, say, Standard can be even that can be a little bit daunting, just because they don't have the access to the same resources that everyone else has, or the same level of commitment.
So, given the option, I would most definitely try to, conform how I play to help the people learn, the person I'm trying to teach learn to play. Although sometimes not everybody has that luxury. Sometimes all they have are, they have 4 modern decks and someone's interested in playing. You can still help someone learn the game through a modern deck. You can, first 3 or 4 games y'all play, you both play with your hands revealed and you tell them why you make certain decision points and what would be good in this scenario, or even just helping them mulligan and maybe getting them to the point where they can pilot that deck on their own or with minimal help. But given the option in a perfect world, I definitely would play with the. You know what I'm trying to say? I already said it.
And Sam, would you
Words are hard.
find yourself a special case per se and just like go against what you did and like bring someone in at the lower power level, or would you say screw it, you're playing modern now?
It's hard to say really, because I think there's also a point of whether or not the person who is teaching enjoys what they're teaching. Because if they're not enjoying teaching them at a lower power level, then it's not going to seem as fun. But if you're comfortable just going through and having a lower powered deck, I remember my local game shop when I went to go teach one of my friends how to play. They're like, "Oh, you want to play Magic? Here, we have these 2 random little kits that have like a 2x4 box."
The welcome
Uh,
decks.
Yep.
the welcome decks, yeah. Then we both got one of those, and I taught him how to play on one of those, which I thought was really fun. I enjoyed that one a lot. But just whatever, it might be easier to get someone in at a lower power level. But as long as you're enjoying the game, I don't really think there matters where you enter.
Well said, good sir. Well said.
Yeah.
So one thing that Jason said, I actually want to bring attention to, going back to it, battle box. So I know what that is. Jason, what is a battle box of like a certain format?
Right, so a battle box usually has 8 established decks from the metagame of a format. So in this case, I taught 2 people how to play Legacy using a battle box, and I did change the battle box a little bit for somebody who was very interested in wanting to play goblins. For example, not a deck I would probably have in most Legacy battle boxes, but he wanted to play goblins, so goblins was in it. All right. So the main reason for this is to give me and other players a chance to try out decks, and so you can just learn about the format some. For example, uh, these are proxied. I want to say that now. Uh, I have not played the Storm style decks in Legacy. They are extremely complicated, but against newer players, or at least newer to the format, it gave me the option to try these things out a little bit. Although I was very keen on playing more of the mid-rangey stuff for more long games to let them try out their things as well. So, and the other thing that's great about this battle box is these were players who already knew how to play the game. They played Modern. So this isn't something I would do so much for a brand new player, but for somebody who's looking for an entry point into a format, battle boxes are fantastic.
I feel like especially Legacy, the complexity of that format, and just the decisions that every choice you make has such an impact that it'd be a hard format to teach someone in. The battle box would be like the best way to introduce someone to that format, though. I think so, at least.
I agree that Legacy is a super complex format that while the battle box can work, it take a lot of time and repetition just to be able to play these decks. Like resolving a brainstorm, that one card alone has tens, maybe even hundreds of articles written on how to resolve and what's the correct thing to do when you cast a brainstorm and when to cast it. Why? Don't cast it. The best brainstorm is the one you never cast.
Well, I mean, no. You don't cast it because there's Chalice on the board because your opponent's playing the right deck.
There is actually, I forget the article it was, but that was like the main point is the best brainstorm is the one you don't have to cast.
I've heard of that article, but I'm biased. I like Chalice of the Void. Don't cast Brainstorm. I will challenge. Don't chalice back to me. I will hopefully catch it.
You missed some before.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not perfect, Cameron. I'm sorry.
I also want to add in that for the Legacy one, like the simple decks that were in there were 4-color Snowco.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Blue-Red Delver with Dreadhorde Arcanist.
Oh, Dreadhorde was out then. Oh. Yep.
And Death and Taxes.
D&T's not an easy deck.
D&T is not an easy deck, but it's a very simple first concept to latch onto. Its surface level is very straightforward. It's when you start playing it more and you find those very key intricacies that you go, "Oh God, this is complicated."
That was Ren legal then as well? It was Ren Astrolabe 4-color pile, right?
I think technically Ren was legal at the time, but I just opted not to include it.
I was gonna say,
deck.
I'd honestly argue that's the easiest deck to play out of those three.
Which is depressing.
Minus fetching the lands. Minus fetching lands.
I mean, Ren and 6 is a relatively linear. But it's not that easy.
It's not easy. None of those decks are easy. I'm not trying to undermine it, but like playing D&T where D&T's a control deck, like we all know this, and tempo can be really hard to play for people learning how to play a game, just straddling that line. Whereas 4-color control kind of has its definition of what it wants to do is just answer anything that hits the board. Or don't let it hit the board.
Is it bad that if I built the new one, I would absolutely include Doomsday?
A little bit.
Not at all. Doomsday's awesome.
Doomsday's great, but boy, are those lines complicated.
Spreadsheet.deck.
Spreadsheet.deck.
But if you're building a battle box now, would you still do Legacy or would you choose a format like Modern or Pioneer?
If I was getting somebody new, like a new player into the game, and I was picking a specific format, Pioneer would probably be my go-to now. I personally don't love Pioneer, but it's a lower cost of barrier. The decks are not too complicated, so there's still plenty of game that's going on here and good decision points being made, plenty of level up moments, and again, accessible decks.
Arclight Phoenix is in that format. It's the best format right now. I rest my case.
Full disclosure, I've never played a game of Pioneer in my life.
I had Mono Green Ram for a while, and then the deck essentially shifted to Mono Green Planeswalkers and dropped the Ugins and everything I was doing. And I was like,
but Ugin is a Planeswalker.
Well, it was playing like Vivian Ranger.
It's not
It was
Nissa who shakes the world.
I didn't play that either. It was like very like it was essentially as most you can play Eldrazi and Pioneer was the style of deck. It was playing Nissa's Pilgrimage, so you could like fetch out 3 forests, and it was doing its hard ramp. It was playing Cavalier Thorns because that ramped you. It was also a 5/6 beater. It was essentially Eldrazi and Pioneer, and they realized, hey, that's not that great, so they dropped it and they started playing like Vivian Arpa Ranger and like going a more mid-rangey green plan with like I think they played Karn in that format as well.
They did not have a sideboard. They literally just had a tutor board. Or they just had a wish board for their planeswalkers.
I love that.
I love slept on cycle is the Cavaliers. I like all those cards.
Cavaliers are cool.
They're all really cool.
Pioneer was one of my favorite formats. It's the first format that I made a deck without having to like net deck. I just went, found the cards I thought were cool, and built a deck. I built a Sherrick's Salt Formation deck, and it's still one of the most fun decks I play.
I have a couple.
I love that so much. I love that so much.
I have a couple very key words for this. Giant enemy crab.
Yep.
God, I love Sherrick's.
I love it so much.
Sherrick's,
I gotta build that as a commander sometime.
It's so bad, but it's so good.
So good.
We've been talking about all these different ways to get into formats with Legacy, Modern, Pioneer, Limited. How do we feel about Commander as being a way to get into Magic or as a format?
It's hard to say it's bad because it's a casual format. It is one of the most accessible ones based on how many pre-constructed decks there are, how casual the format is. It's not all about winning; it's about the experience of playing. But the format is so damn complicated sometimes. Like, if you're not playing pre-cons, and I bring, for instance, One Stop Rock Shop and playing Togo Sakashima, there's so many complicated things, and like understanding for a new player, like how I use these rocks and not just throwing in people's faces, that can be hard for some players to understand. There's a lot of complicated stuff, and that's just one deck. There's so many decks and different things. It's a large card pool. Everyone's trying to do different things. I've said before, you're essentially bringing a player to learn about 300 at least cards in a single game that they've never seen before, probably. If you don't count staples, if it's just 4 different decks completely with different cards, at least 300 cards you're going to have one person learn on the spot. Mm-hmm. That is a really daunting thing for new players. And if you work through them with it, if you sit there and work through it with them, they can start to pick it up more. But it's daunting, but the culture is so good for learning. It is so good to say, hey, we're casually learning and we're going to work through this and we're going to have a good time doing it. It is fantastic. It's a double-edged sword, really.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Like, one thing that's a very important thing that's very helpful for new players is extra effects on cards or non-recurring effects that you'll see across decks are complicated, right? And with Commander, you're using a whole bunch of singletons and unique effects. There's not a ton of redundancy. You don't see Death Touch on every single card you're working with. And sometimes newer players will struggle with the concept of what Death Touch, Vigilance, and First Strike do. But at the same time, repetition is what helps them learn. Mm-hmm. And even though you have a large card pool, if you in a play group of 4 people here, say there's 6 decks played throughout the play group, that's a limited enough card pool where someone can learn the game and get the fundamentals down. So when they do go to an LGS and do a pickup game and they don't know what's going on, they at least have a rough idea. They've probably seen a couple of the cards.
Mm-hmm. It's one thing I often take for granted is that with us, building a lot of decks and having played for so long, we know roughly what we know too many cards off the top of our head, if I'm being frank. Like, just our card library in our head that we know of Magic cards. And so we've already been through the process of learning cards, and I didn't learn in Commander, but I hadn't thought about this, is if you're playing like limited or kitchen table formats, cards are often better based off their keywords, like flying or Death Touch or Vigilance, Lifelink. That it's not the effects that they bring, it's more so that they're just keyword soup. And so you get really accustomed. Yes, you get really accustomed to those keywords, and when you learn that in kitchen table limited, you take that knowledge to Commander, and it makes it really easy to see. Like, you can read off the first 4 like the card may have like 4 abilities and an effect, but the only thing you're really concerned about learning is just the effect on the card that when it enters the battlefield do so.
Also, as a reminder to us established players, since most everyone here and people listening are established
Yes.
players, we don't read cards, we recognize the art.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is another huge thing for new players who have no idea what the art is.
We see the art, we immediately know what it does. We there's 4 different arts for Tarmogoyf. 3 different arts for Tarmogoyf, but we all know what a Tarmogoyf is.
Is it 3?
Yes,
There's
there's
the
the
art and then the Modern Masters art.
and then it got an Ultimate Masters. Ultimate Masters one was different. It was like the deer is on the left and the Tarmogoyf is on the right coming in at it.
You're right. I forgot about that one.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for reminding me.
You're welcome.
That's the extra spiky Tarmogoyf.
Sam, do you think Commander, now that you've kind of gotten to the game and you're playing Commander more often, do you think it's a good starting point for new players?
It depends on what deck you start on, because I think precons are a very good way to get into the deck. CDH, no, just because it's high power. There's going to be combos in there that you do not understand. But as like just getting into the game of Magic, a precon is probably one of the best ways just to pick up a deck, read the card, see what it does, and try to just work around the theme that you have. I think it's a really fun way to learn Magic.
I do have one thing to say in favor of CEH as a learning tool.
Oh,
Ooh.
So,
gonna go again.
yeah, combos, like, it's absolutely complicated, right? It's very difficult to follow what's going on in the lines. So, just giving someone a CDH deck and saying, here's your first game, terrible idea.
yeah.
But you get somebody who's played Magic and let's say they've gotten 40 games under their belt of playing
Mhm.
Commander, transitioning to CDH is actually not that difficult because the staples of the format, in a sense, restrict the card pool. So it's very easy to know what cards are going to play against.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I will caution against like bringing like 40 games and like a little bit of experience. Fantastic. It's hard to convince someone to play a format where half of what you're doing is your mulligan process. I feel like that makes it's very hard to say, hey, we're gonna sit for 20 minutes and work on our mulligans, and we're gonna play a 10-minute game. It can be kind of like that sometimes. That's a little reductive, but
I agree with Ethan in a different way that, like, especially for bringing new players in, we're not advocating for this at all. But if you do, it sometimes I feel like it could be hard for them to grasp the win the game on the spot like triggers, like on Thassa's Oracle, just because like no game action really happened. They cast a Thassa's Oracle in a demonic consultation and won the game. No life was lost. Nobody's life is 0. That the win the game now effects can be kind of difficult to process, and it can leave a lot of feels bads.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to imagine why you lost. That mental image component is actually very relevant. You got run over by some rhinos. Like,
yeah.
Okay, I understand what happened here. I died to rhinos.
Even like
a fish looked into an orb. I lost.
But even like milling out, you at least understand like, hey,
you're out of resources.
You're no longer able to proceed in the battle, therefore you lose. That's easier to understand than a fish looked into an orb and you lost.
I think it boils down to like when you can see a resource is gone and you're like, either I messed up or it wasn't in the cards. Like your life total's gone. You lost because you have no cards in hand. Like that's not why you lost, but card advantage leads to losing a lot. That's easy enough to understand.
There also might be something about learning the game based on your personality. Because I think if you're an extrovert, learning from EDH is going to be a lot easier to do because you're asking questions with multiple people. But an introvert is probably going to be more wanting a one-on-one experience, so they don't have to deal with everybody.
Definitely.
Point.
Actually, would maybe flip that around, because in the case of we talk a lot about learning Commander in a closed group, right? Like a small play group. An introvert would probably be very welcome to a small group, whereas an extrovert would be able to just go to FNM and learn how to play Standard.
That's fair.
Or whatever format, if it's Commander Night or whatever, and they, just depend. I think it's more just going up to the LGS, being comfortable enough to do that and learn with people that you're not necessarily familiar with.
I still think the most important element to restrict for new players is the card pool. even if you don't end up seeing recurring keywords that often, just restricting the number of cards they need to learn helps a lot for new players.
Definitely.
So to your point about card art, do you make sure everyone playing is using the same Art of Kadama's reach? Is that something we need to do?
The newer art's better, right?
Mm,
Right?
Okay, that is a
The newer art's better.
I like the old art though.
I feel like it's better
Ah.
too.
That okay. Well, that's a whole deep rabbit hole. We'll
The
get
new-
into
Next episode, art reviews.
Picking arts is part of the
Send me your altars.
Picking arts as a part of the deck building process, guys. Or did you know?
It is. You're right. And also, to me, choosing set symbols is part of the process too.
Ethan, that is
Hey,
right. I don't like the shiny sticker. I don't.
Okay, it's not this that. I was disappointed when I ordered a C16 Forgotten Ancient and TC Player sent me a C15 Forgotten Ancient that was technically 3 cents more in price. I was sad because I wanted the C16 set symbol. That is the most first world problem I can think of in
That
my
set
life.
is much more near and dear to your heart.
Exactly.
Real talk. Set symbol, absolutely something I will pick a card based on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Almost more than the art for me because I just some symbols sometimes just look ugly and I can't.
How many more
Again, personal
variations of a shield can they do for commander pre-op for commander sets?
But
All right.
some of them look good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's scuff this transition. We want to talk about how we build our decks, and that's why we're talking about set symbols.
Jason.
So, not necessarily like it's more so like the choices we make when going into building our decks. Like for me, I kind of wing it. I know that's not the best advice, but I first use the resources available to me. Look at EDHREC and other people decks that other people have built. And go through like, hey, if I own this card, I'm probably more likely to play it, so I don't have to spend money on cardboard. And so one of my bad habits when I deck build is I put too many cards in my deck. I will put the most I've put over is 120. I've put 220 cards in a deck on Moxfield and had to make about 140 cuts. And that was
He does
awful.
it every time. He does it every time.
Not that many. It's about 130. It's about 30 over on average.
I want to say more than that. You're just cutting it short.
But as I don't use any guides. I have my own guidelines I try to abide by. Like trying to stay around 10 like either ramp spells or rocks, things that give me more mana. Not like rituals. Rituals don't really count, but like your rampant growths or soul ring, arcane signets, things that give you mana. And 2 or 3 board wipes per deck. I like having an overabundance of board wipes. A lot of people have started to cut them, I know. And I like having several just to reset the game if need be. And also, I don't play cards that like have an additional effect. So, say like artifact mutation destroys a artifact or enchantment, or it's just artifacts. I think it's just artifacts. But anyways, it's 4 mana for that effect when I can play Nature's Claim for 1 mana, which I know.
Reputation's 2 mana, but
It's it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's still some overcosted ones. Like, I don't know. What's a card that you see play? What's the one that exiles 1 and then 2 if it's your main phase?
Return to Dust.
Return to Dust.
Yes.
That was one I used to play in a lot of decks because it was a decent card. But now I'm more. I'd probably play Disenchant before that, to be honest, at this point, just because it's cheaper. And then personally, when I build decks, I like to build with commanders that do unique things. Like one of my favorite decks I've ever built is Obeka. Just because that's not a deck I'd play against someone who's just getting into the format, because she's so weird. Because you tap her and ask the person, "Would you like to stop your turn?" And they may or may not know the implications that have. Like, it's still tough to understand that, like, ending the turn, everything goes off the stack. It's exiled, and end of a turn effects wear off. Like, even Obeka's effect doesn't work unless it's a triggered ability on the end step. If it's just something that says it return at its end step, then it just happens whenever the turn ends, as opposed to if it's a trigger place like with Kiki Jiki. where it's exactly at the beginning of the next end step. You with that trigger on the stack, you can tap her and keep everything. So I like to do some chicanery and shenanigans while I play commander. We do a moderate amount of tomfoolery.
A little bit of goofing and gaffing while I
A
build our decks.
little bit of goofing and gaffing.
Yep. I'm pretty lazy, I feel like, which is weird to say because I spend so much time deck building, but it just might just be because I built so many decks, I get lazy with it. I like 30 to 36 lands depending on the format, or depending on if it's a lands deck, I'll go to like in the 40s. I like a high number of mana rocks. If I can't cast my spells, then I'm not playing the game. So I'd rather overestimate on how much mana rocks I need because with command attacks especially, I'd rather be able to cast everything consistently, even if I have overabundance of mana. I'd rather not use all of it than not have enough. That's just personally. That's an idea mostly from like Tomer from Goldfish. He was like, have your decks be mana sources. I overshoot. I'm like, if you're not like at 52, 53, I think you're not running enough. Personally, when just building a deck, I know Cameron's like talking about like I run this many board rush and stuff. I just kind of throw it at the wall and see what sticks. Really, it's more of a feel thing. If a deck needs less removal, then I'll just take it out. I feel like building a deck is two-part: getting the list together and then playing the deck and play testing it. Right? I can build decks all day long, but unless I test them and have experience and data to back it up, then it's pointless, right? We build these decks to play, and if I just build a bunch of decks online and never play them, then I'm not growing as a player to understand, hey, this choice here. Like when you're in the game, you make a choice, let's say to counter a spell, and it turns out it's the wrong mistake. It's like Schrodinger's deck box, really. Is it work out or not? So everything is contextual to the deck as well. Depending on if it's a very creature heavy deck, you're going to run less board wise. A control deck can run more. It just, again, it is very dependent on what your play style is and what you're building. So I'm lazy, so I just kind of throw it at the wall and say, okay, I need more of this after a few games.
Yeah, so for me, I'm very contextual in how I choose to build my decks. I do have some tendencies, like I want the commander to be the focus of the deck, and I do want the commanders to be powerful. So like I love playing commanders like Kalia, Najeela, and Brea, who are all extremely powerful commanders on their own. Uh, I do prefer synergies over combos as well. So it's less about finding the game-ending combo quickly and way more about building up my board state and doing something with it. I don't follow a set template. I do have some generalizations. Like I will play somewhere between 30 and 38 lands. I know, what a range on that, right? I'm going to play between 8 and 15 ramp sources depending on the deck again. And I'll play 0 board wipes in some decks, but if I'm playing a control deck, for example, I'm going to play probably around 5. The other thing is, because I don't set a template, I do ask what the commander wants to do and then see if that's what I want to do with it. So like I look at every element that a commander can potentially do. For example, Brea. Love her because she's incredibly open-ended in how you build that deck. You can do things like ETBs, for example, like building a Brago deck out of Brea is something you can do. You can do Thopter Tribal, Artifact Creature Tribal, just token generation, or you can go for these heavy combos, sack synergies, right? There's a lot of different ways you can take that, and I try to find one variable that I want to focus on. My Brea deck, for example, is an artifact sack deck. I specifically want to sacrifice the creature tokens. So I'm keen on generating extra creature tokens. I'm keen on doing these like really narrow ideas on the deck building and then see what other elements it has synergy with. And because of that, it's not, you can build an open-ended commander. I tend to be very research heavy on how I build my commanders. I will, if I sit down to build a commander deck, it's usually going to take me about 2 hours to do it. I will not let the deck build itself. I will not go to the average deck list on EDHREC and make edits from there. I will occasionally find myself doing what Cameron does with over like 30, 40 cards over, but I also very regularly find myself 20 cards short.
That's a nice problem
Really?
to have.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
I will very regularly go, I'm very concentrated on what I know I want to do. Okay, time to find some filler to round out the deck.
Huh. I'm usually like sitting in the sweet spot, maybe like 5 less or 5 more. Even like your 20 less is interesting, but also considering like I can back up his claim of I don't really go to EDHREC and like just build the average deck. This guy will go to Scryfall to say, okay, I want artifacts that do X, and he will just sit there and scroll through every single card, which ends up making some really interesting decks. Like Toko Sakashima would not be where it's at if we had not sat there and gone through Scryfall. The Hinata Eggs deck that Jason helped me build for the Kamigawa videos would not have been that way if we had not sat there and said, what artifacts say draw a card on them?
Yeah.
Like going through, it's a lot more fulfilling to do it that way, and it lets you do a lot more unique deck building.
One of the
Good job,
things.
Jason.
Thank you. Everyone here does this to a certain degree as well. Is the consideration for power level. I'm inherently an optimizer, so I tend to push towards higher power levels. But there's also the consideration of if I know I want the deck to be a little bit weaker, I will intentionally include weaker cards
100%.
or do something that the commander's not great at doing. Also, I make a ton of flawed concepts, like because I'm open ended on this stuff. You know, the Brea Flicker deck wasn't the best option. My biggest failure was my Bolas Stacks deck because black stacks pieces don't protect planeswalkers. Who would have thought?
You're supposed to kill them before the creatures before they swing.
Exactly.
You're a planeswalker.
Also, it doesn't help when you're playing Torpor Orb and Curse Totem in your deck where you're playing
An ETB creature and an activated ability.
Yeah.
I'm still new to like building commander decks, so what I do is I use the command zone basic outline that they did in their most recent outline video, which I still think is about a year ago now. Was made something like that, but
Yeah, a little over a year.
that's where I started. I kind of do the same thing y'all do, where I just find cards I enjoy or have, put them in a deck, and then try to sort them into, okay, do I have ramp? Do I have card draw? Do I have removal? How many lands do I need? Stuff like that. And still trying to refine the process, but I think joining Smooth Brain has also helped me to where I build more decks. But I also have a problem with getting stuck on like one or two commanders and building variations of that deck. Because my current baby, or I have two babies currently in the process. One is an enchantment cycle tribal with Shrine Commander and Umori as the companion, where it's just all different types of cycles from, or that are enchantments. So I have all the shrines, most of the ley lines, all of the commander curses that appear,
Oh my goodness, this is awesome.
all the impetuses, so everyone else attacks each other.
That's hilarious.
Deep. Damn.
This is fun.
And then I'm also making a Sakashima variant of shrines where all its focus is every non legend rule does not apply card is in there, and just make as many shrines as possible. A bunch of copy effects.
Yeah.
Sam indeed knows what he likes.
Sam knows what he likes, and I respect it.
So Sam mentioned the Command Zone podcast. They have a template that they recommend for deck building for Commander. First thing they have is the cards in the deck as one category. Things like ramp, card draw, single target removal, board wipes, and lands. They recommend having 10 to 12 ramp, 10 card draw, 10 to 12 targeted removal, 3 to 4 board wipes, 35 to 38 lands. Now, there's overlapping categories for this. So another category here is standalone cards. These will be ramp spells or card draw spells or board wipes that synergize with the commander or are effective on their own. They recommend having 25 of them. They recommend having enhancers, which are cards that amplify or amplified by the standalones or the commander. And that's 10 to 12. That would be a card like Panharmonicon. And an enabler, which is covering a weakness or fills a gap in the strategy. They recommend having 7 to 8 of those. And then lastly, and another category here is something that are cards on your theme, which they recommend having about 30. So, great example of this is if you're building an Enchantress deck, they would recommend having a minimum of 30 enchantments.
So while everything is like contextual there, like obviously
Yeah.
they leave room in their template for like variations of numbers. That's why it's a range of things generally. The one thing that I've noticed with this is like there is a lot of overlap in those categories as well, right?
Yep.
So for instance, Death Sprout is removal and a ramp spell. It's like one example that's pretty common to see.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And sometimes you'll have specific cards contextual to the commander. For example, Soulfire Eruption is a major card draw spell for a Hinata deck,
Yay!
but it would
And
be
a board
more of like
wipe.
yeah, it can be. Usually not,
you're
but
lucky.
Well,
if you're lucky, it is a board wipe.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
Right. And that would be a standalone card that is very good for a Hinata deck that you won't see in other decks.
Yeah. I was just more wanting to touch on the contextual thing that I forgot the point I was gonna fucking make. Y'all keep talking. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Baby, come back.
Oh, I remember now. We talked about Enchantress, Sithis, how everything is contextual. Like how in Sithis, your enchantments are also your card draw. Like you're in everything's a card draw spell, and you sneeze, you draw a card. So you don't necessarily need like what are green white card advantage engines. Like I can't really think of it like Livecrafter's Bestiary or I mean that wouldn't work in that deck obviously. Or like you don't need a harmonize. That's a good one. You don't need a random harmonize just to refill your hand.
How about, for example, Search the Premises, which is a 4-mana enchantment. Whenever you are attacked, you investigate. That's probably not a card that you would need in a Sithis deck because you have plenty of card draw, and especially card advantage that you would need to tax yourself on mana to do.
100% agree.
So one thing to remember with a lot of this stuff is like also with these choices, you want to be efficient with your mana and timing, right? Obviously, if a spell is an instant, you're going to prefer that over a sorcery. And if something does the exact same effect for 2 mana compared to 3 mana, you're going to opt for the 2 mana one. So, like for instance, mana rocks like 4 mana mana rocks like Thran Dynamo and Hedron Archive. While I love Thran Dynamo, generally you should run like a Kadama's Reach or a Warm Power Stone over that because you can get down a turn sooner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, efficiency matters a lot, and that's something that we echoed in our deck building process a little bit. Is that we care a lot about the efficiency of the cards. Like, I pretty rarely play 3-mana ramp unless it is specifically Kodama's Reach and Cultivate, and even at higher power levels, I will start cutting those cards.
Yeah, because now that the cards like Nature's Lore and 3 Visits are more like I didn't own those cards, so I didn't play them. But now those cards got really good reprints, and so having access to those 2 mana spells, and I think it also matters how much like the CMC your commander, because obviously if you're playing like Kozilek or something, you're playing the Dreamstone Hedron and the the Warm Power Stones and the Thran Dynamos. Whereas if your commander's 4 mana and your deck's really focused around your commander, you really want to emphasize your turn 2 ramp so that you can get your commander out that turn on that turn 3. You want to be playing your rampant growths, all your talismans and signets. So that, especially in those scenarios, you're really gonna, I think, like top out at your ramp being at 3 mana, or sorry, 2 mana.
Yep.
As the guy that plays Thran Dynamo the most out of everyone I know, I agree, but it's also okay if you don't just stock up on 2 and 3 mana ramp. You can play Thran Dynamo. You can, while it's not as good, Hedron Archive. You can play Gilded Lotus. Those cards are just fine. It just depends on the deck, right? If you're Thran Dynamo is fantastic in a cause like the Great Distortion, right? I think it's fantastic in mono red artifact decks when you can maybe cheat it into play or use it for a big spell and then maybe sacrifice it for a different artifact in your graveyard. It's contextual.
As a mold overall, how do we feel about this? Like, would we, let's say we have our collection in front of us and we're just picking through our cards. Are we just going to default to using the Command Zones template?
I won't just default to it, but I have nothing against using it at all. I think it's a great starting point.
I think my own personal deck building philosophy lines up enough to where it'd be similar to it, but obviously there'd be some differences, like my amount of mana rocks. But also when I just build decks out of cards I own, I don't really even feel like I use a template. I just say, okay, I want to play that card. It's a very different process when you're physically holding the cards and you build from there. At least for me, when I have it on a screen and I can build it and see stats, I'm gonna go about it a different way.
It's much more so a feel thing when you're building a deck, just like when you have cards on your desk, as we all do. Well, Ethan moved, so I don't know if all of his cards are out on his desk anymore. Yes,
They will be soon.
They will be soon.
Probably tomorrow. I gotta build my budget deck for this next video.
And so going through, seeing all these cards, and if you're just on a whim one day, find a commander in your collection you want to build and start building stuff from your collection, it's much more a feel thing. Because as you said, once you get those numbers on your deck building website or whatever, you're going to be more privy to those, like, oh, I have too many 7 drops, or my curve isn't as smooth as I want it to be. But it's much more a feel thing.
Sam, do you have anything to say on that? As our resident uses this template the most.
I do have the problem of defaulting to it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm still not entirely comfortable building a EDH deck, but with this, it gives me a little bit more confidence that whatever I build is going to be semi okay, and that's all I really need is something to just reassure me that I'm doing all right.
You are doing all right.
Yeah.
I hope so.
You are.
Absolutely.
Like, from the bottom of my heart, you are. I appreciate you very much for contributing to this channel and being on the podcast today. That's my thank you. I was going to say after the show, but thank you.
It happened on the show.
I will say one thing. I do have one big criticism of this template, which is tutors.
They don't really fit anywhere.
They are
where
an enabler. But
Yeah.
that's like, do we count this as ramp, card draw, single target removal?
In a
It's
way,
kind
I
of
count 'em as
everything,
card
but
draw.
nothing.
Because it can fill the role of any of those. Do you just treat it
Yeah.
as if it's every single one of those and that bumps up the number? Because then you
I
get to a
mean-
point where it's like, oh, well, I can just run 9 tutors and everything's fine.
I was gonna say you could treat the tutor as the card that you want. So saying you're wanting like a Panharmonicon in that situation, like you're enlightened tutoring for a Panharmonicon. In that situation, your enlightened tutor is an enhancer. I guess you could think of it in that context.
I guess I can't count it as
Mhm.
card draw unless it's like a direct to hand, like demonic tutor, because
Yeah.
a lot of tutors like vampiric, enlightened, worldly, mystical, they go to top of deck, right?
But it's not really advantage. You're
Yeah,
not gaining
but, like-
cards. The only one I can think of is like final parting.
Well,
In a
okay, so
way.
do we count opt as a card draw spell generally?
Fair.
Because it draws you a card and replaces itself.
But you're not gonna play opt as ubiquitously as
A
I
card
think I
draw
use that word right. You're not gonna play opt as much as you're gonna play like a demonic tutor. Like an opt will go in like a whatever the octopus deck you played. Like an opt is probably a card draw because it's ramp in that deck too. It's all very
Technically, yes.
contextual. Yeah, it's ramp.
Yeah.
So, but
Octavia.
like, I feel like, and also some suitors like Court of Calling and Word of Invention and Reshape that go directly to the battlefield. Those aren't. I guess technically it's so contextual and there's so much gray area there.
Mhm.
I agree with Jason on this. I can't really fit tutors into this template effectively.
So just don't play it.
Yeah, tutors great. Don't play it.
There we go.
We did it. We solved it.
We saw the mystery of how we're going to fit that in this episode.
So my thing about this is it's perfect. Like, to use this template is a very good thing for starting out in particular. You will find yourself pretty quickly not needing it though. And I think research tools really help break the mold, because if you have just your cards in front of you, yeah, just go with the template, that's fine. But if you have access to acquiring new resources, and you can just acquire new cards or proxy things, whatever you need to do to get your deck built, then the research tools help a lot. So I would use this in conjunction with a tool, and then pretty quickly become more reliant on just the tool itself, the research tool itself.
We also need to be careful though on some research tools, depending on the deck, right? For instance, one thing I've looked at the up in the average series from EDHREC covered Raynar from the Kaldheim precons, the $20 ones, which we'll get to those here later. So there was an errata on Raynar to where Alter Dementia with the Spirit tokens, I believe, with a Rest in Peace on your side of the field, allowed you to infinitely mill your opponents because the Spirit token would exile from the graveyard, which would then trigger Raynar, making another Spirit. I believe that's how that worked. I could be wrong. But they eroded Raynar to where that no longer works. But the EDHREC's data still shows Alter Dementia and cards for that combo to work in that case, and it doesn't. So be careful with the research information there. I think another thing that Jason has mentioned to me before was like when doing the Zerscale stuff was the EDHREC page on Teferi Temporal Archmage, the mono blue ones from C14. Jason, tell me about that one.
So this is one of those ones where we're not quite sure what's happening, but we have a guess. So 72% of Teferi decks play the Chain Veil. And this is the Teferi that can be played as your commander and has a downtick to untap. I believe it's 4 target permanents.
4.
So you can use the Chain Veil's effect to get another activation of Teferi, and you can untap it, right? And then on top of that, 60% of the decks play enough mana rocks to enable the Chain Veil combo, to where you can almost go infinite with untapping and generating near infinite mana. So we're unsure, like if you use the research tools, for example, the research tools are going to tell you you should definitely run the Chain Veil combo. But for what you want to do, that may not be what you want, right? You may not want to have infinite combos in your deck, and it may turn you off of the commander just because it has the option to do an infinite combo. So if I was going to build the deck, I would prefer to avoid the near infinite combos and not do a CDH version of the deck, because that I should mention this. CDH is the primary place where you find this combo, although it is a bit outdated at this point since it's less popular within the meta because of how much mana it requires. Yeah, the EDHREC, just copying the basic list off of EDHREC would put you likely having that combo in your deck. And this is where gaps in knowledge become really relevant. So if you don't feel like you have the right knowledge for it, sometimes just relying on the command zone template is maybe better, especially if you know you don't want a combo.
Speaking to your point about EDHREC, I use it as a resource a lot, so I see this all the time. Where I blue black X or blue black is one of my I really like that color combination because zombies and blue black flash. Flash is one of my favorite keywords, and so I built this Nimrus deck, and I forget the percentage numbers, but there's this really I'm playing Lockmere Serpent in this deck, which is a really bad 6-drop. I don't care, it's fun. But also, you see right next to it in high synergy or however many people are playing it, it's Thoracle, it's Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation. Right. So you're going to get this really weird hodgepodge if you just copy a basic list from EDHREC of cards that are really good, like they're doing that kind of thing, but you also get winning the game in the CEDH versions, but you're also getting the more casual budget. Those two things don't go together. I don't want to say you're doing either one or the other, but you're definitely not playing Lockmere Serpent in a deck that has Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation.
And at least on EDHREC, you can narrow down the parameters to say only search and give me data for decks that do not include Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation, and Tainted Pact.
Didn't know you could do that.
CDH. I okay. I know you were gone last week. Maybe I mentioned it last episode. But you can definitely do that, and I will show you later if you'd like me to.
Huge.
It's really helpful. It's weird on the site. Once you figure out how to actually use that search tool, it's very helpful actually.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the template, do we recommend it? Because I want to say yes with an asterisk. Use with discretion here. You need to make sure you have your own play style and preferences in there. But overall, you can use it. It is a helpful tool to help you learn how to build decks effectively and then build off of it from there.
As the resident user of it, I do recommend it. It's very good for a casual power level, at least. The number of board wipes gets a little bit iffy just because I like to go a little bit higher on the kind of meat of the deck rather than having outliers like that, but it's fine. It's a really good outlet to help new brewers build a deck that they really want to play around with.
Yeah, echoing what Sam said, I highly recommend it as a resource for newer players or people who have limited ability to acquire new cards, for example. Like if you just have a limited card pool to work with, then yeah, the template's great. But the more experienced you get, the more you're going to break that mold from the template. So of course, I use EDHREC constantly, and it's a very useful tool, but I also have a heavy reliance on just doing the research through Scryfall myself. So I find that the more you gain experience, the less you're going to rely on these tools so heavily.
Cameron, do you have anything to add to that, or do you just kind of?
No, but I think he made a good point.
Yeah. Kind of speaking on the whole point of resources and stuff. I just a question for you guys. What do you guys would say is like your top 3 resources for Magic EDH deck building? Like if you had to choose like 3 websites to use, say you can only use these 3 to a new player, what would you recommend to them?
Google, no. No, websites obviously EDHREC specifically for Commander is really good. I I'm bad. I still use the Gatherer instead of Scryfall because
Do you want to say like Scryfall / Gatherer?
I guess I do the same thing Jason does. Like I was brewing a Silas, Ghost of Ramirez deck.
Oh yeah.
And I was looking for stuff that like sacrifice this artifact or sacrifice an artifact. So anything that could sacrifice itself or another artifact, I filtered through that and looked at everything. Third website, I don't know. Can I say Goldfish so I can look at other people's deck lists? Because that
No, that's fine.
I would say Moxfield in that spot.
Moxfield, yeah.
For Commander, because you can search decks on Moxfield. And I think that the interface for finding decks is for casual decks is better on Moxfield. If you're trying to like find competitive tournament results, MTG Goldfish I think beats out Moxfield for sure. But like talking about specifically casual or competitive EDH, I mean, actually especially competitive, a lot of competitive EDH players use Moxfield, which is fantastic to see because the primer section is very very easy to see and very, from my experience, has been easy to use. Sam, what do you feel like? Do you think like those 3 recommendations, like EDHREC, Scryfall / Gatherer to find cards, and Moxfield to build a deck on there? Do you think like those are like the 3 pillars that a new player should maybe like kind of gravitate towards?
I would say so, yeah, or at least the style of deck, because I think MTG Goldfish and Moxfield, I can go back and forth on, because I like when I'm looking for a deck that MTG Goldfish will list the price beside the deck, and I don't have to like click on it to go and see. It just lists the price there and like 15 other decks like it, so I can go and look at around what I'm willing to pay for a deck and find it that way. Because money is also a big kind of restriction in my case, but
On Moxfield, you can adjust your settings for your account to show price, I believe. I know, like for your own decks, you can adjust it based on like deck, but I think you can like set it up to where it always shows you like the price per card. Though it doesn't default towards the cheapest, it defaults towards the one that the deck has set. So like if I say I have a Masterpiece Mox Opal, it'll show the price of the Masterpiece Mox Opal compared to the cheapest one, which I don't know, Double Masters. Was that Prince of Double Masters? I don't know. Uh, but it will go based on what set is set there. Goldfish always does the cheapest pricing, which I do appreciate.
overall, I think those are the best resources to use to look at, try to build a deck, look at cards, find cards, stuff like that.
All right, and I believe that's going to wrap up our. No, Jason's going to cut me off.
I got something for you.
All right.
For deck building resources, there is one more thing I would add to this, because obviously, so the holy trinity of deck building here is an aggregate resource, right? An aggregate deck resource, some place to put your own deck online, and then access to Gather or Scryfall as a search engine. Right? That's the main holy trinity. I could make an argument that you don't need to actually put it online. You could just keep your deck in front of you. So I'm going to put the 4th option here, which is content creators. I'm going to cheat a little bit.
It's cheating.
It is cheating, but I'm going to say a couple of content creators who are excellent deck builders or people that you would want to talk to, right? If you're doing CEDH content, for example, of course, you can do the database, but you can also talk with Playing with Power. If you want to do something that's on a budget, you have Commander's Quarters. And if you want to do like strictly casual content, just watching gameplay videos where they post the deck lists gives you an option and a feel for what you should be doing. You can watch something like Commander Versus or Game Nights, for example. Game Nights is probably one of the best resources due to the podcast component too. And while you're here, keep listening to us.
One other creator I actually want to shout out as well that I follow on TikTok. I think he posts on YouTube, but I haven't actually seen his videos, and I check him out. Commanding Presents on TikTok. While I don't think he's really done any like deck text or stuff that's come across my For You page, he actually like delves into like, hey, what does this strategy mean in Magic? What does this color combo really do? and just like really dives into off like a bunch of different topics in a format that is really accessible. And also his image for all of his videos is the Pondering My Orb guy, and I love it.
Excellent.
So that's like another content creator I want to shout out that I've been following for a little bit, and I really like what he does. So if you're on TikTok, follow that guy.
And one more thing about resources to use. We mentioned friends, but just showing your friends your deck list and seeing what they think is also a really good resource to use. Because I will admit that I don't do it often enough, but it is a very good resource just to get a different perspective of what you might want to be doing for a deck.
That's
Talk to us,
honestly
man. We love you.
Honestly, that is probably the 4th most used resource for our content creation.
Yeah.
Ask us.
Yeah. And if you want to ask us for advice on your deck list, we have a Discord server. We're having a brewers what's the channel name? I'm blanking on it right.
Brewing
right
Brains.
hard.
Brewing
Brains. Brewing Brains. So we have a Discord channel in our Discord server for brewing. We've had a few people join the server so far and ask for feedback. We've been trying to give as much feedback that's been helpful as possible. So if you have any questions, you can use us as a resource. We'd love to talk to you. Join our Discord. The link will be in the description below, as well as our social media. But now, finally wrapping up this section, as I've been trying to do, and people keep on cutting me off. That wraps up our main topics today. But we're angry.
We're angry.
We are mad. We are malding. We
Malding.
Are furious.
Gangy.
We are so. So we've spent 3 episodes, about the past 2 months, talking about how much we love the damn $20 Commander precons that
We've
we're
been
getting. Commander
singing
Legends and Kaldheim. And guess what,
their
guys?
praises.
They
What?
discontinue them officially.
It's a sad time.
Being sad. Why?
Money.
Why?
Yeah. So the $20 price point is gone. We are still getting Commander precons with every set, but they're at the $40 price point, and they're built around multiple commanders, which is the most annoying part about this, because the linear function of building around a single commander is what I loved the most about them.
AC did AC things. Wyleth did Wyleth things. Land one did Land one things.
They were just good decks out of the box, and they made sense. You could throw them at a new player and say, "Hey, this is your commander. He does a thing. The rest of the deck supports that."
That's exactly what you did, Ethan.
That's exactly what I did with my friend Josiah. I said, "Here's the AC precon. Have fun. Buy some upgrades for it. It does AC things." Like that. That's exactly what it is. And they got rid of them. I don't want to talk too much trash, but I just don't get it. From a player perspective, they were a fantastic product that I really liked.
One thing I immediately thought of is that we often see the $40 commander decks as an avenue for reprints, which to a lesser extent the $20 ones were too. Like, it helps for a new player to get their first Soul Ring and Arcane Signet and Cultivate, etc., etc. But like, I didn't see those. I didn't see the $20 decks as that. I saw them as good decks to get people into a certain avenue. Like Wyleth is the one I'm going to go with, because that's probably what I'm more akin to doing.
It has Sunforger in there. That's why he likes it.
Yes, thank you. Wyleth does one thing. You suit him up and you swing. He does it real good. But that's... And I don't think there are any... There are no other options for the commander out of those decks, are there?
No.
Yeah. No. So
I think it maybe had Jorkadine in it. I can't remember. But like...
You're not.
Yeah,
you're
not
not
building around that.
No. And so that's often the problem we have with the $40 ones, is that they can kind of be all over the place a little bit in what the commanders are wanting to do. Like, obviously, like thinking on Millicent was a really good spirits commander, but the alternate commanders, I honestly can't tell you what they do. I think they were the partner ones. Yep. So
one for me was the Witherbloom precon. Like Guillaume was the alternate commander that cared about food.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
it was very not. It makes sense, but the deck didn't support that really at all.
Or Felisa with Brina, right?
That one more so.
That was fine enough.
Okay,
that was fine enough.
The Guillaume one definitely doesn't make sense, because that was a life gain deck, and while the food are a life gain source, Guillaume is a creature enter the battlefield deck.
Yeah. Here's probably my both egregious, but I like it because we cannot not talk about Karazakar on this channel.
Yeah, Silent, my favorite.
Prosper and Karazakar have
That's it.
nothing in common.
There it is. Yes, I love Karazakar so much.
I love Prosper so much.
I'm kidding. Prosper's fine.
I will fight you. I'll drive down there again.
It was about time Rakdos got a good stuff commander. Rakdos had always been kind of niche. They got it, and it makes sense for Rakdos.
Yeah.
But yeah, Goad and like cards like Disrupt Decorum I think Disrupt Decorum was in the pre-con. It just those cards are trying to do Karazakar things as well as Prosper things, and those things don't mix. They're two completely different strategies.
Also, seeing the price of a $20 entry point versus a $40 entry
Yeah,
point,
definitely.
like it matters so much. It was so easy to sell people on, here's a $20 commander deck, and I actually like it, as opposed to a $40 commander deck with, it's got some good stuff.
Yeah.
It's got higher value cards in it.
Newer players shouldn't really be caring about that. They just want a good deck.
I just want to have fun.
Granted, it's a question worth asking, especially because you have new to Magic, but not new to card games, is a pretty common player type as well.
Yeah.
So any last thoughts on our frustrations on this product discontinuation?
We'll get over it.
Bring it
They
back.
will be missed.
I already miss it. Bring it back.
Jason won't get over it.
I'm very upset about this whole thing.
I am too. I bought. Let's see. I definitely bought the Wylith one at one point just so I had a Sunforger. I wanted a Sunforger.
Of course, that's why I came and bought that one.
I think did I ever play Wylith as a commander? I think I built the Akiri deck I built a long time ago. The Spread the Love Akiri. That was mainly from the Wylith deck.
Yeah, that's true. They only made 6 of those pre-con too, right? They did Commander Legends, they did Kaldheim, and they did Zendikar Rising, right?
Yep.
There's just those 3 sets. Yeah, so they only did 6 of them.
Yeah, I'm
And
pretty sure it's only 6.
they should have done more. Like I had both the Kaldheim ones and I had the AC one, and like I want to go back and buy the other 3 because like they were just good value. I am so bummed about these damn pre-cons, and I'm also super bummed that this episode of the Wrinkly Brain podcast is coming to a close. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. Sorry again about the delay in the last episode. Hopefully it won't happen again. Hopefully my life's going to figure itself out, but we'll find out as we go. In recent news, again, we have the public Discord, which has been fantastic. We love talking to you, to everyone joining. Shout out to our friend Simeon Urchin. They have joined the Discord and been chatting with us, sending a lot of memes, sending some deck lists for us to talk about. Really enjoyed having them. We love to talk to you as well. We really appreciate all the support. Links to the Discord and our social media will be in the description. I hope you all enjoyed the gameplay video this week. It should have been budget content, I believe. If not, that's coming out soon. We're really excited for those videos. This has been Ethan, Jason, Cameron, and Sam of the Wrinkly Brain podcast signing out.